That Saturday morning in late October began for Elijah Ward in the smallest of ways. Before the sun had fully risen over the harbor town of Barrows Haven, when the pale, diluted light of dawn seeped through the thin cotton curtains of his attic bedroom and touched the stack of worn paperbacks on his desk and the framed photograph of his mother, Monica Ward, in her FBI dress blues, taken years ago on the day she had been promoted to special agent in charge, a moment of pride he had carried quietly through high school even though most classmates never knew what she did and those who did tended to ask questions more about her gun than her achievements. And Elijah, lying there under a patchwork quilt, felt the familiar crispness of autumn air sliding through the slightly open window along with the distant cries of gulls and the occasional creak of the old cedar-framed house, the scent of laundry detergent still clinging to his pillowcase. After a few minutes of stillness, he sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes and glancing at the second drawer of his desk where, under a notebook and a folded pair of socks, lay the envelope with the small stack of bills he had saved from 3 months of weekend shifts at Charlie's Fish and Supply down on the docks, where he had stacked crates and hauled ice until his arms ached because he had decided months ago that this year he would buy his mother something lasting for her birthday. The silver locket in McAllister & Sons jewelry with the engraving of 2 intertwined olive branches, the one he had seen 3 weeks earlier in the front window under the soft glow of the display lamp. He rose, dressed in a clean white t-shirt under his old denim jacket, pulled on jeans worn thin at the knees, and laced his sneakers with careful fingers, then stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, noting again the resemblance to his late father in the cleft of his chin but seeing his mother's calm, watchful eyes in his own reflection. Downstairs the kitchen was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock, and he drank a quick glass of orange juice before slipping the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. Patting it once for reassurance before stepping outside into the cool morning where the white-painted clapboard houses gleamed faintly in the early light, the sidewalks still damp from an overnight mist, and the air carried the mingled scent of brine from the harbor and bread baking in the small bakery on Alder Street. He took the half-mile walk to Main Street slowly, glancing toward the water where fishing boats bobbed gently, mast swaying, and past shopkeepers sweeping away the curled orange leaves that had fallen overnight. Past Murphy's Cafe where the barista was arranging pastries, until the green-painted front of McAllister & Sons came into view, its gold leaf lettering catching the morning light just enough to make the whole storefront look as though it belonged to another time, and in the front window the locket was exactly where it had been before, glimmering softly beside a pair of sapphire earrings. Elijah slowed, stepped closer, and just looked for a while, imagining his mother's face when she opened the box. When from his right the door to the artisanal soap shop opened and a middle-aged woman in a cream wool coat stepped out carrying a paper bag tied with twine, sunglasses perched in her hair despite the weak sunlight, and she noticed him immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly in a way that was subtle but unmistakable, her gaze fixed on him for longer than politeness allowed, and Elijah felt the faint weight of her scrutiny but kept his attention on the locket until she shifted her stance, drew a phone from her bag, muttered something too low for him to catch, then took a deliberate step toward him and said in a clipped, falsely polite voice, "Can I help you with something?" Elijah turned, surprised, and replied, "No, ma'am, just looking," but as he turned back toward the glass he heard her speaking into her phone now in a voice pitched loud enough for him to hear. "Yes, I'm outside McAllister's." Tall black teenager, staring at the display for several minutes. "Looks suspicious. Might be casing the place." "Yes, hurry if you can." Every word landing in his chest like a small blow, but he said nothing, choosing instead to step toward the shop door and push it open, the bell above tinkling as he entered the warm, quiet space where the smell of polished wood and velvet cases replaced the cool salt air. Mr. David McAllister stood behind the counter, glasses perched low on his nose as he adjusted a watchband, and looked up with a genuine smile, greeting Elijah with, "Good morning," in a way that eased the knot in his stomach slightly. And Elijah had just begun to ask about the locket when the shop's front glass caught a flicker of red and blue light, then the low rumble of a patrol car pulling up outside, and a tall uniformed officer stepped out, resting a hand casually on his belt as the woman in the cream coat gestured toward the shop, mouthing, "That's him." The officer entered, boots clicking softly on the floor, and in a low but firm tone said, "Son, I need to talk to you for a minute," prompting Mr. McAllister to glance up sharply and ask, "Is there a problem, officer?" Before an answer came, the woman pushed in, declaring, "I saw him out here for several minutes, staring at the jewelry like he was planning something. I know trouble when I see it," her voice carrying that brittle certainty of someone convinced her assumptions were facts. Elijah, trying to keep his voice steady, said, "I'm here to buy a locket for my mom," but she scoffed, "Sure you are," folding her arms. And the officer, though not aggressive, asked for ID. Elijah reached for his wallet but paused as another siren began in the distance. Not the sharp rise of a local police car but the deep, commanding wail of a federal vehicle, and moments later a black SUV pulled in beside the patrol car, its tinted windows reflecting the gray sky, and from it stepped a tall black woman in a tailored navy trench coat whose stride was swift and whose presence filled the space before she even entered. She pushed the door open, the bell chiming again, and without glancing at the woman in the coat, fixed her eyes on the officer and said in a voice calm but edged with authority, "Is there a reason my son is being questioned in a jewelry store on his day off?" The shop fell silent, the woman in the coat's face draining of color as the officer straightened and said, "Chief Ward. I didn't realize, but Monica Ward, special agent in charge of the FBI's Boston field office, cut him off with, 'You realized enough to respond to an unfounded call without first considering the source,'" her gaze steady, her tone the kind that makes people rethink their choices. She turned to Elijah, softened, asked, "You all right, Eli?" And when he nodded, placed a hand on his shoulder before facing the woman whose earlier confidence had crumbled into stammered excuses about just trying to protect the store, and, "You never know these days." Monica stepped closer, saying, "What I know is that prejudice disguised as caution is still prejudice, and that my son deserves the same presumption of innocence as anyone else." Each word deliberate and heavy. Mr. McAllister, jaw tight, opened the case, lifted the silver locket Elijah had been saving for, and set it gently on the counter, saying, "This one's on me, Elijah. Your mother clearly raised a fine young man." And in that moment the air in the shop held a mix of shame, relief, and something quieter, the kind of shift that lingers after the moment has passed. While outside the harbor gulls wheeled and the world carried on, though for everyone in that shop, the morning had left a mark they would not forget.